The night air sat heavy over the gated community, thick with the kind of heat that made even the crickets go quiet.
I'm only asking for a bottle of water.
The voice was small, barely above a whisper. But it carried through the heavy oak door like it had been waiting all night for someone to finally open it. Grayson Hartwell froze with his hand still on the deadbolt. He had not expected a voice, not at this hour. Not behind gates that cost more annually to maintain than most people made in a year. He turned the lock the rest of the way and pulled the door open, slow, cautious, the way a man opens something when he already suspects he won't like what's on the other side. A girl stood on the porch. She couldn't have been older than 11. Her shirt clung to her skin, soaked through with sweat. A baby boy rested against her hip, his head lolling weakly against her shoulder, his lips dry under the porch light. She didn't step forward. She didn't ask twice. She just stood there, swaying slightly, like the heat itself was trying to take her down too. Grayson didn't answer right away. His eyes moved over her slowly, taking in the details a careful man always notices first. No car in the driveway. No adult waiting at the curb. No sound of footsteps coming up behind her. Just a child, alone, carrying a weight far too heavy for her age, standing at the edge of a world that had not been built to let her in. Behind him, footsteps. His wife, Renee, appeared in the hallway, robe pulled tight, voice already sharpening before she even reached the door. "Marcus, Grayson, who is it?" He didn't turn around. His eyes were locked on the girl, on the baby. On the way, her arms trembled from a weight she had clearly been carrying for far longer than they could hold. "A child," he said quietly. "Asking for water." Renee's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. She had seen this before, or versions of it. People at the gate with stories polished, just enough to get a foot in the door. And a foot in the door was never just a foot. "Grayson," she said, lower now. "You know what the sign says." He did know. Everyone in this neighborhood knew. Black letters on white metal, posted right at the edge of the driveway, under a security camera that never blinked. No soliciting. No loitering. Violators will be reported. But the girl wasn't reciting a script. She was barely standing. "Please," she said. "He hasn't had anything since this morning." Something about the way she said he, not my brother, not a name, made it sound like she'd repeated those words so many times tonight that she had nothing left to finish the sentence properly. Grayson felt something tighten low in his chest. An old familiar instinct, the one that had kept him alive in boardrooms and out of lawsuits, the one that told him to be careful. People learned how to make their voices shake. People learned which words opened doors. But her eyes weren't doing what practiced eyes do. They weren't pleading for sympathy. They were just tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that belongs to someone who has already heard no more times tonight than a child should ever have to hear it. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl's jaw tightened. "My mum," she started, then stopped. Her grip on the baby shifted, like the question itself was too heavy to hold while she answered it. "She got sick at the bus stop. Then they took her in an ambulance." Grayson didn't move. "And you're out here, alone." "I had a paper," she said, and that's when he noticed it, crumpled tight in her free hand, damp at the edges from sweat, with the hospital name on it. "I was trying to find someone who could help me read where to go." Renee's voice came again, tighter this time. "Grayson, this is exactly the kind of—" "What's your name?" Grayson asked, cutting her off without even meaning to. The girl blinked, surprised the question wasn't another rejection. "Kyra," she said. "This is my brother, Eli. Hi, viewers. If a tired, thirsty child knocked on your door tonight, would you let her in, or would you play it safe and turn her away? Drop a simple yes or no below. I want to know where you really stand before this story changes your mind." Grayson looked down at the paper in her hand. He hadn't asked to see it. He didn't need to. Something about the way she held on to it, like it was the only solid thing left in a night that had fallen apart around her, told him everything he needed to know about how real this was. "Let me see that," he said. Kyra hesitated only a second before holding it out. Renee stepped closer behind him. "Don't take anything from her, Grayson. We don't know," but he had already unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, pressed hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it didn't have time to be careful. A hospital name, a department, a patient name scrawled at the bottom, half smudged from sweat or rain or both. He read it once. Then he read it again, slower the second time, because something about the patient's name sat strange in his chest, familiar in a way he couldn't yet place, like a word on the tip of his tongue that refused to surface. He looked up at Kyra. "Where exactly did you find this?" "A lady gave it to me," Kyra said, "after they took my mum away. She said somebody had to keep it safe so we could find her again." Grayson felt his pulse shift, just slightly, just enough to notice. He had read thousands of pages in his life, contracts worth more than this entire neighborhood, reports that decided which companies lived and which ones didn't. But none of them had ever made his hands feel unsteady the way this single piece of paper did. Something about the name. Something he wasn't ready to admit to himself yet. "Grayson," Renee said again, quieter now, watching his face change. "What is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked back at Kyra, standing there with her brother slipping further into exhaustion against her shoulder, both of them waiting on a porch that wasn't built for people to be welcomed, only watched. "You said she got sick at the bus stop," Grayson said slowly. "Do you know what time?" Kyra shook her head. "I don't know. It was still light out. Eli was crying because he was thirsty. And then she just went down. People started yelling. Somebody called 911. I grabbed him, and I didn't even think. I just held him." Grayson's throat tightened. He folded the paper carefully. The way you fold something you suddenly understand might matter more than you first thought. "Wait here," he said. Kyra's face shifted, bracing for the words she'd heard all night. Wait here usually meant a door closing. It usually meant a porch light switching off behind glass. But Grayson didn't close the door. He stepped back instead and pulled it wider. "Come inside," he said. "Both of you." Renee's mouth opened to protest, but no words came out. Because something in her husband's voice had changed. It wasn't charity in his tone anymore. It wasn't even kindness. Not exactly. It was recognition. And as Kyra stepped over the threshold, careful not to let her shoes touch too hard against the marble, careful in the way children become when they've learned that adults can change their minds over the smallest things, Grayson stood frozen for one more second in the doorway, staring at the name on that paper. A name he was almost certain, though he couldn't yet say why, he had heard before, years ago, on a night he had spent a long time trying to forget. The water glass sat untouched on the counter for nearly a full minute. Kyra stared at it like it might disappear as she reached for it too fast. Like good things had habit of vanishing the second you trusted them. "Drink," Grayson said gently. "It's not going anywhere." She drank, like someone who had forgotten what trusting a stranger felt like. Eli, propped against her shoulder, stirred at the sound of liquid, his lips parting on instinct before his eyes had even opened. Grayson watched the boy's small fingers curl weakly around the edge of the blanket Renee had draped over him, and something in his chest pulled tight in a way he didn't have a name for yet. Renee stood at the edge of the kitchen, arms crossed, watching her husband move around his own home like a man she barely recognized. "Grayson," she said quietly. A word. He followed her into the hallway, out of earshot, though not far enough that Kyra couldn't feel the tension bleeding through the walls. "You don't even know these children," Renee whispered. "You don't know if that paper is even real." "I know what I saw in her face," Grayson said. "That wasn't a performance. People learn how to perform desperation, not like that." Renee studied him, something shifting behind her eyes. She had been married to this man for 9 years. She had watched him build an empire out of caution, out of never trusting a story until it had been verified 3 times over. She had never once seen him fold this fast. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Grayson didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he didn't fully understand it himself yet. Just a name on a piece of paper. Just a feeling crawling up the back of his neck, like a memory trying to claw its way back to the surface after years buried underground. He walked back into the kitchen and knelt slightly so he was closer to Kyra's height. "This woman on the paper," he said carefully. "Your mother, what's she like?" Kyra wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "She works 2 jobs. She always says we don't ask people for things we can't pay back. Does she ever talk about her past, before you were born?" Kyra frowned, thinking. "Sometimes. She said she used to drive for one of those rideshare apps. Late nights. She said she quit after something happened. She never said what." Grayson felt the floor tilt slightly beneath him. He stood up slowly, walking to the window, staring out at nothing in particular while his mind worked through 10 years of distance in the space of a few seconds. Late nights. Rideshare. A woman who refused to explain why she stopped. It couldn't be, and yet some part of him, the part that had spent 10 years trying not to think about a stretch of dark highway and a stranger's voice telling him, "Stay awake, don't you dare close your eyes," that part of him was already certain. He picked up his phone. "I'm calling the hospital," he said. The call connected after 2 rings. A nurse picked up, voice clipped and tired from a long shift. "This is Grayson Hartwell," he said. "I'm calling about a patient who came in tonight from a bus stop collapse. I believe her name is on a hospital intake from this evening." There was a pause, papers shuffling, a keyboard clicking somewhere in the background. "Sir, are you family?" "No, but I have her daughter with me, 11 years old, a baby brother too." The nurse's tone shifted instantly. "You have the children?" "We've had staff trying to reach next of kin for hours. We didn't have a contact number." Grayson closed his eyes briefly. "Is she stable?" "She's been asking for her daughter every time she's alert enough to speak," the nurse said. "Please, bring her in." Grayson lowered the phone. Kyra was watching him, every muscle in her small frame pulled tight with the kind of fear children shouldn't have to carry alone. "Is she okay?" Kyra asked. Her voice cracked on the last word. "She's there," Grayson said. "She's asking for you." Kyra's chin trembled, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded, the way someone nods when they've decided crying is a luxury they can't afford yet. Renee stepped forward, her arms unfolding for the first time all night. "I'll get my coat," she said quietly. Grayson looked at her, surprised. "She needs more than one adult walking her through this," Renee said, almost to herself. "And so do you." Something passed between them in that moment, something that didn't need more words. Within minutes, the house had changed shape entirely. A coat pulled from a closet, a blanket wrapped gently around Eli, keys lifted from a bowl by the door that usually only held weight for business trips, not moments like this. Kyra stood in the foyer, watching the 2 adults move with sudden purpose, and something in her posture eased just slightly. Not trust yet, not fully, but the smallest beginning of it. The garage door rose with a low mechanical hum, and Grayson's car sat waiting, dark and polished, a vehicle built for boardroom arrivals, not midnight rescues. He opened the back door for Kyra without thinking twice about it. She climbed in slowly, settling Eli beside her, one hand resting protectively across his chest the entire time, as if the seatbelt alone wasn't enough to keep him safe. Grayson stood by the open driver's door for 1 extra second before getting in. He looked back at the house behind him, at the porch light still glowing, at the sign near the gate he had walked past 1,000 times without ever questioning it. Tonight, that sign had almost cost a child everything. He got in the car. The engine started, low and steady, and as the headlights swept across the driveway, Grayson felt something settle inside him that had been unsettled for 10 long years. The drive started in silence. Grayson pulled out of the gated entrance, merging onto the road beyond it, the quiet hum of the engine, the only sound filling the car. "How long have you lived around here?" he asked, mostly to fill the silence, mostly because his mind needed somewhere to land that wasn't the name still echoing through it. "We moved a year ago," Kyra said. "After my dad left. Mom said it was closer to her new job." What's her name? Grayson asked. Quiet, careful, like the question itself might be fragile enough to break something if asked too loudly. Denise, Kyra said. Denise Carter. Grayson's hands tightened on the wheel. The car seemed to hold its breath with him. Denise. It had been 10 years since he'd heard that name spoken out loud. 10 years since a woman he never properly thanked had pulled her car off a dark road in the middle of a storm to keep a stranger from dying alone on the pavement after a crash that should have ended his life that night. He remembered her voice more than her face, steady, unshaken, refusing to let him close his eyes, refusing to let him give up, even when every part of him wanted to. He remembered waking up in a hospital 3 days later and being told a woman had stayed with him until the ambulance arrived, then left before anyone could properly record her name. He had searched, quietly, in the years after. Without much success, life had eventually pulled him forward, the way life does, and the search had faded into something he rarely let himself think about. Until tonight. Until a girl with her mother's same steady, stubborn eyes had stood on his porch, asking for nothing more than a bottle of water. He said nothing the rest of the drive, but something inside him had already shifted into a different gear entirely. Not caution anymore, certainty. The road stretched ahead, dark and quiet, broken only by the occasional gas station glowing like an island in the night. Renee sat beside Kyra in the back now, having slipped in next to her without announcement, one hand resting lightly near the edge of the blanket wrapped around Eli, not pulling it tighter, just present. Kyra glanced at her once. Renee offered the smallest nod. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it wasn't distance either. Something in between, something new for Bo and Willsbury. Something in between, something new for both of them. Grayson said, "You don't even know her." Grayson's eyes flicked briefly to the rearview mirror. "I might," he said. "More than you think." Kyra frowned at that, but said nothing more. The kind of confusion that doesn't ask follow-up questions because it's too tired to carry one more thing tonight. She turned her head toward the window instead, watching the streets pass by. Dark houses, empty sidewalks. A city that felt far less generous than the one she had grown up believing in. "Did you know," she said quietly, almost to herself. 3 people turned their porch lights off when they saw me coming. Grayson's jaw tightened. "They didn't know you," he said. "They didn't try to," Kyra answered. Nobody spoke for a while after that. The weight of her sentence sat in the car like something none of them knew how to lift. The hospital came into view ahead, tall and pale against the dark sky, its emergency entrance glowing under a wide awning crowded with the quiet urgency of a place that never fully slept. Paramedics moved with practiced speed near the doors. Cars pulled in and out in a rhythm that never quite stopped. Grayson parked close to the entrance. "Stay here 1 second," he told Kyra gently. "I'll make sure they're ready for you." Kyra's grip on Eli tightened instinctively. "Please don't make us wait again." "I won't," Grayson said. And for the first time that night, his voice carried something Kyra hadn't heard from an adult in longer than she could remember. A promise that intended to be kept. Inside, the front desk nurse looked up the second he approached. "Mr. Hartwell?" He nodded once. "The children are outside," he said. "Denise Carter's children." The nurse's shoulders dropped with visible relief. "Thank goodness. She's stable, but she's been disoriented, confused about time. She keeps asking the same question over and over." "What question?" The nurse hesitated, glancing down at her chart as though the words felt strange to say out loud. "She keeps asking if the man from the highway ever made it home safe." Grayson stood completely still. The noise of the emergency room blurred around him into something distant and unimportant. Stretchers rolling past, voices overlapping. None of it reached him, because in that single sentence, every doubt he had carried since reading that crumpled piece of paper disappeared entirely. It was her. After 10 years, it was finally her. He pressed a hand briefly against the counter, steadying himself, the way a man steadies himself against a truth too large to absorb, standing still. "Take me to her," he said, "and bring the children in." The nurse studied him for a moment, something curious passing over her face, but she didn't ask. She simply nodded and reached for the radio at her shoulder. Grayson turned back toward the entrance, toward the car where two children sat waiting for an answer they didn't yet know they were about to receive. He didn't know how to explain 10 years in a time it would take to walk back to that car. He wasn't sure he needed to. Some truths didn't need explaining. They only needed to be stood in front of. He stepped back outside. Kyra was already standing by the car, Eli balanced against her hip, scanning the building like she might see her mother through solid walls if she just looked hard enough. "They're ready for you," Grayson said. "Come on." Inside, the hallway felt louder than the night air had. Machines beeping somewhere down the corridor, a stretcher rolling past, a man arguing quietly with someone at a desk about paperwork. Kyra stayed close to Grayson, without quite touching him, the way a child stays close to an adult they haven't fully decided to trust yet, but have run out of other options. At a turn near a row of curtained rooms, a nurse slowed their pace. "She's just ahead," the nurse said. "She's tired, but she's awake." Kyra stopped walking. Grayson looked down at her. "You ready?" Her voice came out smaller than before. "What if she doesn't remember today? What if she's scared?" Grayson crouched slightly so he was level with her. "Then you'll still be there, and she'll know that." Kyra nodded, holding on to that the way someone holds onto a railing on a staircase they can't fully see. They reached the room. Through the glass partition, Grayson saw a woman lying in the bed, an IV line taped gently to her arm, her eyes closed, her breathing steady but careful. The careful breathing of someone whose body had just been through more than it should have to survive in one day. And the moment Grayson saw her face fully for the first time in 10 years, something inside him clicked into place that he had spent a decade trying to forget existed at all. It was her, without question, without doubt. The same woman who had once knelt over him on a rain-soaked road and refused to let him slip away, even though she had no obligation to stop, no reason to stay, nothing to gain by risking her own night for a stranger bleeding out beside his crumpled car. Kyra didn't wait for permission. She slipped past the nurse and crossed the room, stopping just short of the bed, standing on her toes slightly to see over the rail. "Mum, I'm here," she whispered. Denise's eyes opened slowly, heavy, searching. And then, finding her daughter's face, something in her expression eased in a way no medication in that hospital could have managed. "Baby," she whispered. "You found your way." "I had the paper," Kyra said. "I kept it safe." Denise's gaze drifted past her daughter then, landing on the man standing just inside the doorway. Confusion flickered first, then something else. Something that took a moment to surface, the way memory always takes a moment when it's been buried under 10 years of ordinary days. "You," she said softly. Grayson stepped closer, his voice unsteady in a way it almost never was.
"Yes, ma'am,"
he said. "I made it home." Denise's eyes filled, though she didn't have the strength to cry the way the moment deserved. "I always wondered. I never stopped wondering either," Grayson said. "Until tonight." The room held still around them. Kyra looked between the two adults, sensing something important passing through the air that she didn't yet understand. Something bigger than tonight. Something rooted in a part of her mother's life she had never been told about. Renee stood near the doorway, quiet, watching the scene unfold with an expression that had completely shed the suspicion she'd carried all night. In its place was something closer to humility. "I don't understand," Kyra said slowly, looking up at Grayson. "How do you two know each other?" Denise reached weakly for her daughter's hand. "A long time ago," she said. "Before you were born, I stopped on a road I shouldn't have stopped on. There was a man in trouble. I couldn't just drive past him." "That man was you?" Kyra asked Grayson, eyes widening. "That man was me," Grayson said quietly. Before anyone could say more, a nurse stepped quietly into the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we'll need to run a few more tests. Her heart rate spiked earlier tonight, and we want to make sure there isn't something deeper going on before we discharge her." Grayson's expression shifted instantly. What kind of tests? We found something on her scans we didn't expect, the nurse said carefully. We need a specialist to confirm before we say anything further. Kyra's hand found her mother's again, gripping tighter. Denise tried to offer her daughter a reassuring smile, but exhaustion blurred the edges of it. Grayson stood there, the weight of the last 10 years and the uncertainty of the next 10 minutes pressing down on him all at once. Because the woman who had once refused to let him die on the side of a dark road was now lying in a hospital bed with an unanswered question hanging over her chart. And whatever that specialist was about to walk in and say next would decide far more than just tonight. The specialist arrived 20 minutes later, a tall man with tired eyes and a tablet tucked under one arm, the kind of calm that only comes from years of delivering news people aren't ready to hear. Mrs. Carter, he said gently, I'm Dr. Reyes. I want to walk you through what we found. Kyra's grip on her mother's hand tightened. Grayson stepped closer to the bed, his presence steady, though nothing about him felt steady inside. Your collapse tonight wasn't only from the heat. Dr. Reyes said, your scans show a cardiac irregularity. It's likely been developing for some time, possibly years, without symptoms severe enough to notice. Tonight pushed your body past what it could compensate for. The room went quiet. Is it serious? Denise asked, her voice rough but steady. It's treatable, Dr. Reyes said carefully, but it requires intervention soon. Without it, we'd be looking at a much higher risk of this happening again. And next time, we might not be as fortunate with the outcome. Kyra's eyes welled instantly, the fear she had been holding back all night finally breaking through. She's going to be okay, right? She asked, her voice small. Dr. Reyes glanced at Grayson before answering, something in his expression suggesting he understood there was more weight in that room than just a medical diagnosis. With the right care, yes, he said. But it won't be simple. It won't be cheap, either. Denise closed her eyes briefly. I don't have insurance that covers something like this, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone in the room. I'll figure it out. No, Grayson said. You won't have to. Denise opened her eyes, looking at him. Whatever this requires, Grayson continued, consider it handled. I don't take charity, Denise said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. This isn't charity, Grayson said. 10 years ago, you stopped on a road you didn't have to stop on. You stayed when staying cost you something. I never got the chance to thank you properly. Let me do that now. Denise studied him for a long moment, the kind of look that weighs pride against necessity, against a daughter standing beside her bed, against a son who had nearly gone the night without water. This is a debt, Grayson said quietly, not a gift. Let me pay it. Something in Denise's expression softened. She gave the smallest nod. Dr. Reyes excused himself to begin preparations, and the room settled into something quieter, steadier than it had been all night. Kyra sat at the edge of the bed, still holding her mother's hand, her shoulders finally beginning to ease from the tension they'd carried since the bus stop that afternoon. You really knew her? Kyra asked Grayson. Before tonight? I owe her my life, Grayson said simply. And I spent 10 years not knowing how to find her to say so. And now you found her because I knocked on your door. You didn't just knock, Grayson said. You brought her back to me. Kyra looked down at the paper still folded in Grayson's coat pocket, the one she had carried through 3 rejected doors before finding his. That paper, she said. It wasn't just directions, was it? Grayson shook his head slowly. No. It was the thing that finally closed a circle I thought I'd lost forever. Renee stepped closer to the bed, her voice gentle in a way it hadn't been all night. We'll make sure you have everything you need, she said to Denise. Not just tonight, after this too. Denise looked between the 3 of them, her daughter, the man she had once saved, the woman who had softened from suspicion into something closer to family. I never expected this, she admitted quietly. I just wanted my baby girl to find her way to me. She did, Grayson said. And in doing that, she found her way back to something I'd been searching for a very long time. The room held a kind of stillness that didn't need any more words to fill it. Outside the window, the first hint of morning light had begun to soften the dark sky, the long night finally beginning to loosen its grip. Kyra rested her head gently against her mother's arm, eyes heavy, finally allowing herself to feel safe enough to be tired. Grayson stood at the foot of the bed, watching the family he had nearly turned away from his porch only hours earlier, and understood with complete clarity that tonight had not been a coincidence. It had been a debt finally finding its way home. But as the early light crept further into the room, Dr. Reyes returned with a second piece of paperwork in his hand, his expression carrying something he hadn't shown them the first time around. Something he had been waiting to confirm before bringing it into the room at all. "There's one more thing," he said quietly, regarding her test results. "Something in her file that goes back further than tonight." Grayson felt his chest tighten. Because what Dr. Reyes was about to reveal wasn't only about Denise's heart. It was about a detail buried in her medical history from 10 years ago, a detail that connects directly to the night of that crash. One that's going to change everything Grayson believed about how he survived that road and how much Denise truly sacrificed to make sure he did. What that file says and what it means for everyone standing in that room is something you will not want to miss in the next video. Because the truth waiting on that page is about to turn an act of gratitude into something far deeper than anyone in that hospital room is prepared for. If this story moved you tonight, you already know what it feels like to watch someone choose kindness when walking away would have been so much easier. Hit subscribe, because stories like this one, the ones that remind us a single act of compassion can come back around in ways we never expect, are exactly what this channel is built on. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what Grayson discovers next, because what's waiting in that file is going to change everything you think you understand about this story. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever helped a stranger without knowing it would come back to change your life? I read every single one. See you in the next video.